wave of technology coming in. I'm sitting here with our favorite host, Ankita Mehta, and I'm Stefan Godley from Dragon Labs. Today's guest is Terence La. He has a lot of experience talking to different business leaders about emerging technology, especially AI now is in your focus. So welcome to the cast, Terence.
Welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me. Super thrilled.
You're welcome. So I would suggest we start right into the topic, maybe with this initial question. What initially sparked your passion about AI? Why is this a topic which is so present in your current work life?
Yeah. So it's a really interesting story. When everyone heard about ChatGPT, that was in 2022, November, I was already dealing with it for more than 2 years. So back at the time in 2020, I was having an agency, a marketing agency, where we focus a lot on copywriting, landing page creation, but also creating Facebook ads. So the core point was all about how can we write copy that would make sure that people start buying from the company. And then we stumbled upon this tool called GPT-3, and it was just released. It was around July 2020. And for me, it was kind of a shocker because I thought copywriting is an art that requires a lot of creativity, that is very difficult to mimic for any type of AI tools. And GPT-3 came out, and it wasn't perfect, but it was surprisingly good at capturing some of the nuances. And for me, the world, when everyone was shocked in 2022, I was shocked in 2020. And so I just, I didn't really have access right immediately. So I actually pinged someone from OpenAI to give me access, and I got the DaVinci model. So that was really, really eye-opening for me to see how tools can literally just turn the world upside down. And since then, I experimented a lot. Back then, I was still having a different startup, so I had to focus on that. In 2021, I also was more into the crypto and Web3 side. But starting in 2022, especially after December, I focused quite a lot on building different use cases for AI and whatnot. And I also spent so much time and actually money to the point that I spent more than $500 on AI tools, testing different tools every single month for a while, until the novelty disappeared.
That's super interesting. Like, maybe if we can go into something very concrete for our audience, do you have like a certain moment in your mind where you remember like that was this wow effect where you knew this technology is here to stay? It's not just a hype, it's an actual trend, and you want to embrace your career wrapping around this new topic, artificial intelligence. Suddenly it's here for the mainstream. Now, can you point out something very specific of what triggered this urgency in you?
It was really the moment of when ChatGPT came out and everyone was shocked. This was the moment. And fun fact, I was actually heavily against it. And this sounds very probably surprising to many people, but because, some people know me as the person who constantly talks about AI and can't stop talking about it. But it is actually not the case that I was for it all the time, because I worked really hard on my cognitive skills. I went to a business school and I worked really hard to, learn how to write essays and solve cases. And suddenly there's an AI that can do almost everything I can do. Well, not yet, but that was really shocking to me. So in the moment, I was rather resisting to it. But at some point, after a while, I realized, it doesn't really matter whether I oppose to it or not. The world just keeps spinning. And that was the moment when I realized, hey, I actually have to join it. If you can't beat it, you have to join it. And not a single entity in the past was able to, oppose to technology and win. And for me, I realized, hey, this is the normal status quo, and it's time for me to understand that I just have to work on that. And since then, I've worked on multiple different use cases.
So
Tell us, how has your journey or usage of AI evolved from using it for copywriting to now using it to what? So, what are the different types of areas you've used AI for, and what's been your experience? Maybe AI is great at something and not so good at something else.
Yeah, definitely. So back at the time when I was, for instance, using the tool called conversion.ai, which became Jarvis.ai and Jasper.ai, it's a copywriting tool. You basically put in text, it outputs text. The prompt is already pre-given by them. And if you think about that, it's just like input, output, input, output. It's not life changing. Well, it saves you a lot of time, but how I'm using right now is more in the realm of understanding how we can kind of replicate the whole workflow. Meaning, how can we use multiple different tools so that many processes are automated? That's what I'm working on right now. And also, I
So they're
do believe
more
that,
interconnecting over time and leaping into each other's kind of business. And we or you as a consultant are mainly facing this challenge of, okay, what tool, what brackets do I place together so value derives from that? Is that true, or do you find other challenges maybe you encountered which were hard to solve, which you maybe can say, hey, okay, someone is listening who owns a business, who runs a business, and he's on the urge, or she, to say, okay, I need to implement AI. As you say, like a lot of people feel this urge, like I'm gonna be left behind if I don't apply AI in my work processes. So can you give maybe a tip or a hint of what such business leaders would maybe face as challenges and how to overcome them? Maybe it's a broad question, but we can also focus on something specific which you actually solved in your past.
yeah, so the challenges are manifold, actually. And I think right now, so my type of challenges that I faced in the beginning are different ones than right now. I can talk briefly about the type of experiences I've had, and then slowly transition to the challenges of business leaders. So personally, in the beginning, I wasn't advising companies. I wasn't giving speeches. I was, as said, kind of against the widespread adoption to it. Very surprising. And so for me, I wanted to build something, a startup that then eventually would get me onto into YC, Y Combinator. And I was partly successful with getting into the first step, and I did manage to go into the second step. And so what I realized is any type of use cases that I was building back at the time, like a year ago, are not as important right now anymore, because now it's already almost obvious. So the speed of how things are moving are insane. And I mean, we already know that you also have built use cases, and just overnight, OpenAI can come up with something and your whole business model is destroyed. Many people call it, most startups are just GPT wrapper. I don't really agree, but OpenAI does have a huge influence. So that's why I had to figure out, hey, how can we define use cases that are not just, instantly replaceable, where there's some type of mode. And I defined around 5, 6 criteria, which is, I was looking at, hey, what are products that I can build that have a high speed to first sale, meaning how much do I have to build? How can I build things that I can easily sell fast? And second of all, I was looking at semi-high entry barriers, meaning trying to figure out like industries where not everyone can just enter. If you look at the B2C market, just another copywriting tool doesn't cut it at the moment, because it's just way too saturated. Everyone can enter, also the AI photo generation realm. So I was looking for things that takes a little bit more time to enter. I was also looking at the ROI, because many people build cool looking tools, but there's no ROI behind it or no measurable business value. And then the next 2 criteria are, I was looking at the big corporates like Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, and Google. What will they not build in the next 6 to 12 months? And after that, we can't really predict anymore. And lastly, I was also looking for specific industries to build use cases for. And so one of the use case I was focusing on was an AI co-pilot for VCs. Another one are, well, some of the products I can't really disclaim yet because I'm still actively working on them, and they seem to be quite promising. And then regarding your question about what are the challenges for business owners, I think that's a really good question that you just raised. What I think is a really big difficulty for most people is to understand, like, hey, what are the low hanging fruits? What can we literally just use in order to have immediate effect? How can we convince the employees to actually adopt to it and not resist to it? And then always business owners always think about the safety and the regulations, the data privacy, but also like want all of this replace the type of work as they know it. And I think these are rather the questions they are dealing with at the moment. And frankly speaking, there are many solutions that nowadays smart people work on, and that just clearly speak for a clear use case in this realm. So, for instance, there has been studies being published where companies say that they reported to have a 3x return on investment on the initial cost. So in terms of AI implementations. So that basically answers the question. If you implement the right things, it has a really high return on investment, but you just need to know what. But also, junior workers can get 43% faster, according to another studies, if they focus more on upskilling. Because, obviously, if you ask an expert to use AI, the effect would hugely diminish. And personally speaking, I think like many people can focus, if they use the AI tools efficiently and they know how it works, they just spend way less time, and I think tech layoffs will just be way more common, as many people, as we just don't need as many people for specific positions because AI does all the heavy lifting. I want to add another point onto it. I believe when it comes to AI adoption, there are three different steps, three different levels of transformations that company go through. And some of them have the highest return of investment, some of them have less, and some of them takes just way more time. And the question is, what should they actually do if the market is moving all the time and OpenAI can probably just release, robots or even agents? We don't know, right? But based on my latest research and what I am aware of, I think employees first should, or let's say companies should first focus on upskilling employees, because that really gives the highest return on investment. And it also is the lowest hanging fruit. And it's just all about understanding, how they should use the tools. So if you just tell them, hey, just experiment a little bit, it doesn't really work like that. Employees are not really quite often open to new changes, and they're not trying to figure out how to, figure out hacks, how to use it more efficiently. So there needs to be someone from externally telling them how to leverage these tools. But second of all, also having workflows. Afterwards, the next transformational level is building processes and workflows around them, making sure that the companies, basically that some of the processes and the department processes run automatically. So they can adopt some of the software as a service solutions, or they can build something internally. And then lastly, it's all about disrupting the business model, because AI has the potential to do things fundamentally different, which requires a lot of systemic and structural change. But that is going to be very transformational and probably the next thing that's going to happen.
Yeah, a lot of insights for people who listen to this podcast. I think what I like is that you really were able to open up what is the right way to think about innovation as a startup founder yourself. I think you helped a lot of people understanding what is important to actually consider before running into a direction. It's like, okay, look at how you can defend the case long term, which is not easy in this landscape.
Correct.
And then for business leaders to really consider a lot of different aspects, right? So planning probably is one of the most relevant steps in this whole process.
Speed. I think one thing you really talked about was speed, which is, I think, speed to market for a business that's trying to implement AI solution or a business that's trying to adopt AI. I think speed to market is critical. But I think I have one interesting question. You discussed what should businesses should focus on, which is, I think, upskilling and looking at building internal processes. But then how does a business leader identify what? So what process should ideally be automated, and what should be the first, say, 5 processes to automate using AI? How should a business leader be able to identify the what aspect of it? I think that is something which is often very hard when you're running like multiple processes, multiple departments, functions.
And you're actually not flexible to choose a new route, right? You're like, okay, my business is here, it's established for 20 years. Now AI comes, what do I do with it?
Correct,
How do I approach this in general?
Yes, correct.
Have you been experiencing these conversations with other corporate leaders where you say, okay, I'm starting actually from scratch. This is my business. This is AI. It's super abstract to me. Like, how do I touch it? Do I find a way to actually make the first step?
Yeah, I think the first steps really lies in implementing some of the low-hanging fruits. And I mean, frankly speaking, there are different departments that are easily, automatable. And I'm talking about the back office, right? Invoice processing, document processing, data entry, data parsing. And some of the things that require a lot of time can be easily processed by AI. And this is probably one of the, obvious areas to look into. And another area to look into is, now everyone knows ChatGPT, but many companies are, for instance, right now focusing on having an internal company GPT for them. This is also what I'm focusing on because it's a low-hanging fruit, so that employees can interact with it and always operate and collaborate on the latest data. Because if you basically, for instance, use ChatGPT for your own data, first of all, some people raise the concern, where does the data go into? Second of all, also, it doesn't have all the company information there, right? You can upload some files, but it's limited to 10 files and that's it. Even with a corporate account of ChatGPT, like for enterprises, it doesn't update the data all the time. Like, you have to upload new documents in order to have AI, basically have AI train on them, and then the chatbot is then basically updated. So I think these are the areas we have to look into. But second of all, I think one of the more important ways to look into that is to focus on show and don't tell. Because many people just talk about, these are the potentials, this is amazing, just do it. Why not just showing it? Hey, this is what we have done, look at this. This is how much time it took previously, and with this tool, now it takes way less time. And that is really transformational if you can pinpoint exactly, how it's going to make this transition and the transformation. And I do believe that many companies can't really pinpoint such areas yet, and that's why external people like us could help them and guide them through the processes. I think also every single industry is significantly different, and if we can just if we have like a really good understanding of several industries, we have the advantage of finding the exact use cases way faster.
Yeah, so it's a lot about understanding what is forgivable, right? Like, you talk about back office processes which are not client facing. You don't risk the brand. Like, start with those items where you still can have control even though AI is performing a task.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good kind of initial thought to put in people's heads. Like, okay, what is forgivable in your business? Which processes are not risking damage of the brand if they go wrong? And maybe start with them, gain confidence, and then expand within the organization based on the success of the first integrations. Um, Excellent. I would love to hear a bit, kind of a bit more of our outlook before we go maybe in a bit soft factors for business leaders, like how to maneuver this topic within the organization on an ethical standpoint. But before diving into this, could you kind of frame a bit in your understanding and with your kind of information at hand, how do you see AI evolve in the landscape of corporates? Like, let's say a bit more long term, like in 5, 10 years.
Yeah.
Do you think every business uses AI? And if so, in what capacities? Or what is in your mind if you look into the future of AI in corporates?
Yeah, the obvious truth is people won't really call it AI anymore because it's so deeply ingrained in all the processes. Like the same way we don't call our laptop as, well, this laptop is equipped with Wi-Fi and uploads things onto the cloud and has a GPU processor of whatever. So these are just features and people don't really pay attention to them as much anymore. So they would just say, hey, just give it to the computer and it does all the rest. And so I believe that this is what's going to happen. So AI is just so deeply ingrained so that people don't really think about it as much anymore. And it just becomes so obvious. It's a part of us. It's like using our phone. We don't really question anymore. Does it run on 4G or 5G? We just use our phone and expect to watch videos. And I believe that this is the
It sounds a bit like doomsday, right? Like, I think for a lot of listeners, they say like, okay, but we're always talking about enhancing the workforce, and now suddenly we face this kind of fear of replacement. So what are we as people actually providing or adding to the economy of the future? Is it just all kind of transforming into different type of jobs where like human skills and like being in person actually is key of the value attribution? Or how do you perceive people working in such an environment?
That's a really good point. That's a really good point, especially about the process of how do you call it? This digitalization, I would say. I don't know whether this word exists, but I believe that nowadays, if we can't actually even trust what is even real and what is not real, whether, I mean, right now I can still confirm that you're real and hopefully I am real, but in the future we don't know it anymore. And if that is the case, how do we still build businesses? And I think we're going kind of like back to the roots where we just meet people on site, where we talk to people to have business relationships. And I believe that this is going to be next step, but also about how business leaders should basically transition and how they should think about it. Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. If they don't play along, the cost of the companies are just going to be higher than everyone else that play along. So inevitably, the cost of goods sold would be so much higher than everyone else. So they would go out of the business. So everyone has to adapt. And so it's not an option anymore. It's not just nice to have, it's must have.
Yeah.
And for employees, the requirements are going to be higher and higher, right? So in the past, maybe people just have to say, yeah, let's finish this presentation in 2 days. And suddenly maybe now the new requirement is finish this presentation in 2 hours. And the way to actually do it is to know the tools so well that they can actually finish a presentation in 2 hours instead of 2 days. And so I think this is requirement. People would struggle in the beginning, so that's why upskilling comes into play. But even more importantly, I believe that maybe in the future, I mean, there are only two scenarios, right? Either people are way more efficient and produce 2 times the output, or less people are needed. And both of the scenarios will happen, one or another. So it's either maybe like 4 days work week, or maybe even 2 days work week, and people just spend time with something else, or maybe people just work twice as much, or they produce twice as much but working as much. I think both scenarios will happen, and some type of combination in between will be the case. Regarding what's the value of the human kind? I think this is a really interesting question because I was thinking about that, and that was the reason why I was, you know, um, heavily against the adoption of AI, which was I was having an existential crisis. So I mean, I did so many things. What's the value of it? And I believe that it's just kind of we just have to redefine what is value, right? Because our current definition of value is different than maybe how it was like many years ago. And I think our just understanding needs to adapt to it as well, right? Because back at the time, think about it, 1,000 years ago, that's not like a big company hiring people to be in cubicles. So this was only a thing of the last 100 years. And so in the next 100 years, I don't. I mean, if I could tell you what's the future gonna be, it's gonna be easy for me, but I can't tell either. So I think we just have to redefine, what is actually art, what is actually what makes us special. And so far, I know like in-person meetings and this emotional touch is what makes us human, but also the unpredictability, right? So AI is quite predictable at its core right now, right? Like it looks at probability, but we humans, we are acting very unpredictably, irrationally, and maybe that's our
Yeah,
superpower.
at least on an individual level, that's right. So I think to summarize, like we know and understand that this huge shift is coming. No one really knows where it goes to, but to prepare with upskilling and being part of this transformation definitely helps to protect your own interest and career, I guess, on every level of the hierarchy. Um, I truly believe like there's a lot of unknowns and risks in this whole adventure, but as you say, like it's here already. We can't stop it. It's too late, probably, to really influence where it goes, and we just need to make sure that we can stay safe. So I think and how I perceive it is like I try to do baby steps as often as possible, right? Because you can't take these huge leaps, but every day you can stay on top, make a baby step forward, make one thing more automated, and then slowly, I think we personally also transition into this new era and feel comfortable by it.
But you talked about something very interesting, which is safety, right? So how do you now? I mean, talking about safety, there's like various types of safety when you use AI. I mean, it could be about data safety, your information safety. How do you ensure that? And given I think it's not possible to put controls at every step. So how do you think this will evolve in terms of people perceiving data privacy, and how will businesses or corporations perceive data privacy and individual privacy?
Oh, this is a multifaceted question. So I believe that so the first thing is, where is the data stored? Who processes the data? At some point, we're probably heading toward a future where, not so much processing power is needed. So we can actually even run it internally by the companies themselves. That could be an option, right? So that people, for instance, have like similar to the cloud providers, you have Swiss cloud providers, you have Swiss AI providers. So that's one thing that I can think of in terms of privacy, where we, for instance, don't use closed source AI models, but open source AI models like Falcon or Llama 2 or Llama whatever versions it will be in the future. So the shift to more privacy focused models, that will be a thing. But second of all, also the explainability of the model, right? Because right now we don't actually know what is exactly happening, why the AI is making a conclusion like this. We just see the output, we see the input and the output, but we don't really see, like why exactly is this the output? And so I think explainability will be something that will heavily enhance because technology would be ripe, but also making it understandable for the average Joe. Like, hey, this is what's happening right now. And it would give them a lot more clarity. And lastly, also, which decisions are made by AI? and which decisions are made by humans. That needs to be clarified as well, like labeling this is AI generated picture, this decision was made by AI. And I think this is really, really important. We human beings should still have a final say, and that's really important that we still do the quality assurance and say, this is approved by us, and we can confidently send it out or submit or deliver or whatever. And I believe that this is really important. The thing is, like, people always talk about biases, and we are just as biased right now. I think we're way more biased than AI by any means. And so...
And the risk is that we don't understand it, right? It's not visible that we are getting bias, especially in these closed-sourced LLMs. I think it's a big unknown, like what is actually programmed into the moral, right? Like which moral is used and like who decides about the moral, which then basically implicates like different societies all over the world. And currently there's literally no regulation in place to actually take care of these things. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of unknowns. That's definitely clear. If you look into a bit more these aspects of morality and ethical kind of appliance of this technology, do you see a risk for employees, or do you see a risk overall, or like how do you perceive the landscape currently? Is it actually even safe to go this route, or should we refrain as a society to go further?
You see, AI at the moment is actually at the lowest point it will ever be. So in the future, we're talking about robots that can bring our children to bed. We're talking about not just self-driving cars, but also AI agents. And society, the impact on society is going to be huge. But one thing I learned by, I was at the World Economic Forum, and then there's Sam Altman. I was able to take a selfie with him and briefly chat with him. But he also mentioned something really interesting. When AGI comes, meaning, artificial intelligence that is probably as smart as us or probably smarter than all of us, probably people will freak out for 2 weeks, and then they would just accept it. And that's how we saw with GPT-4, right? People were panicking, and then life just continued as usual. And I believe that this is probably what's going to happen in terms of society. There are still many things to be fixed. We're still talking about people not having access to water and to food. And so AI should probably focus on these areas. And so in this regard, like regarding our healthcare system, in regard to our food ecosystem, we would see significant changes in a positive way where diseases are curable. And so that's a good thing. But there's also the other side, which is how would the world function if deepfakes become the new normal and everyone can just create deepfakes of you and anyone else who have enough material on the internet? This is a question that I don't know how to answer, but sometimes when I figure out if I can't answer it and people probably can't answer it either, maybe we have to use AI to answer it. Maybe if AI is smarter than us, they should probably answer these questions for us.
Absolutely. And there's other technological innovations which might come handy. I'm thinking specifically about the provably fair consensus algorithms working in blockchain and kind of this immutability which can prove or verify the legitimacy of information. So I think we're going to see a lot of those emerging techs merging into each other and supporting their use cases, which is very interesting to follow.
I mean, historically, you would have always seen a technology which disrupts in both a positive and negative way, always ends up having new tools or new technologies that sort of mitigate risk, or they sort of assess risk and control quality. So I think maybe there's already something happening on that front, or there's something that will happen soon. But I'm sure there'll be enough mitigation.
Hopefully, yes. And
should we move to, I think, the next section, which is, I think we always usually do a fireside set of questions, which are positioned like fireside set of questions. I think a few questions which are interesting in general for the space. So I think we start with the first one. Terence, for you, is AI ultimately a friend or a foe to humanity?
Um, yeah, I believe AI is just a tool, right? It doesn't have its own willpower at the moment, so it is a friend and a foe depending on how you use it. So
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think we already touched a bit your vision, but still just going back to that, ultimately, do you think AI-driven automations will actually lead to kind of a death of employment as we know it today? Or is it maybe even giving birth to something new, a new era of how we add value to economy?
yeah, this is a little bit controversial how I'm gonna frame it. I think there's way less jobs in the future, and I mean it's highly controversial. I believe that there's probably going to be less value have pursuing some type of education as well. But there are potentially, I mean, to shed some light and hope. Um, I mean, there will be new jobs that we just don't understand yet at the moment. I think generally there will be, you know, less jobs than right now, and which probably, especially with, we would probably get paid in a different way, and I don't know yet in what way.
I think as a follow-up of that, so if you think that it will lead to, some jobs, of course, being taken away and some jobs being replaced. So if that's the case, do you think then will it lead to a scenario where everybody would have, say, a universal basic income, which is concept of UBI?
Yes, I think so. I think it's really UBI is just the tip of the iceberg. And what's happening now is more like how are we gonna spend our time and where does even the universal basic income come from? And I believe that we probably have to start taxing all these robots and AI automation tools and these software companies because they are creating all the value creation and charging clients. So I think UBI will happen, but it's not going to be our savior. It is the closest assumption we can have what will happen in the future.
Amazing. Yeah, it's truly hard to foresee what's going to happen, and because it's a global issue, we probably need to change our geopolitics in a way and really collaborate on a solution, which is something new. I think people try to find solutions for the climate change in an international forum, and we all see that without having an actual hierarchy or a decision maker in place, it's super hard to find a consensus. So I think people speaking about threats and AI, they're actually legitimate and we should listen to them. Like even going to as far as saying, okay, ASI, artificial super intelligence eventually comes after general intelligence. That be a legitimate concern? Or do you think, that's anyways science fictions, like we're just talking about these crazy words, but until artificial intelligence surpasses our common understanding of the world and these principles of our thinking, it will not happen anyway soon. So we should forget about those and focus on the actual value we can implement right now.
Sorry, what's the question?
Yeah, so maybe I can rephrase the question. Like in your perception, Terence, do you think like talking and maybe even proactively approaching a solution for this rather legitimate concern of a threat of ASI, is this something we should like work around our heads right now, or is this something which currently is science fiction and we can take care of that eventually in the future?
So I learned something really simple in my life. What I cannot change, I should just, not focus all my attention to it. I realized that, so for me, personally speaking, I think super intelligence will just happen in the next maybe 10 years. And, but there's no, like, whatever I do, it's not going to change the outcome. It's the same thing as debating whether God exists or not. It's the same thing as whether we're in a simulation or not. We can just debate as long as possible, and there's no solution we can derive because we can't prove it. So for me, I just realized, I just have to accept the fact that it will happen or it might happen, and and I shouldn't spend all my energy thinking about it. And I think that also gives us a little bit of a peace of mind. When it happens, it happens. And if it happens tomorrow, then maybe it's time to freak out tomorrow and not today. Hi, I'm back.
All right. So we said we're gonna do one more question and then go to the outro. In the outro, we basically just ask you to maybe phrase a takeaway of today's conversation, and then we say goodbye, kind of thing.
Cool.
All right. You take the leads and keep that for last.
Okay, so Terence, do you think AI can actually be creative, or is AI just using what it's been fed with, or using and mimicking human creativity to give different outputs?
Creativity is a little bit of a difficult term to define, right? So typically we think something is creative because it's something out of the box. I believe that every idea that we have nowadays is somewhat a rehearsal of something that was said before, just framed in a different way. If you look at, this philosophy of any type of thing, ancient philosophies, and how the current self-help books are portrayed in the airport, it's just something that was said differently before. So I believe creativity is basically just combining multiple different things that exist, like, to bake a cake with different ingredients, and people just put it differently. When it comes to this, AI already has so much knowledge of our past so that it can also be equally creative. Now, what it can't really do is to probably come up with these breakthrough moments. And in our life right now, there are only a few things that just fundamentally change our life, which is the emergence of blockchain, the LLMs coming out, and maybe like the invention of the internet. There are only a few things that are really breathtaking, and I think AI has a little bit some way to go at the moment. So to answer it shortly, it can be creative, yes, but not to an extent yet where it fundamentally redefines the rules.
Got it. I think very interesting. So I think, Terence, I think my takeaway so far is, I mean, there's some things that are inevitable, but I think what I really liked about what you spoke was on two aspects, which is upskilling. That if, as an individual or as a business, if I were to focus on what can I do in my capacity, irrespective of what's inevitable, is to upskill and to be aware what is the potential of the technology and what does it power. And the second thing, which is a big takeaway for me, is speed, which is be very sure the speed to market has to be phenomenal for you to really be in the game. So I think these are basic two takeaways for me. What's your final, I think, what would you want to leave the audience with? Maybe one line or two sentences that you would like to leave the audience with?
Yeah, thanks first of all also for inviting me and for seamlessly making the transitions to so many different interesting topics. I really appreciated the podcast. It's also something that I haven't done as often. And so personally speaking, I believe that there are two takeaways, I would say. And one of them is embrace AI, implement it in your workflow nowadays. If you're an employee, if you're working for a company, just try to look at different tutorials, how to use different AIs to make sure that you are faster, and because this becomes a valuable skill. So it is still true that AI is not replacing you. AI is replacing those people who are not using AI. So at the moment, without AGI and ASI, this is the truth. This is what makes you stand out. And I think please embrace it. Then second of all, I do believe that AI causes a lot of discomfort, including to myself. And we just have to also embrace it as something that will happen. It's a part of our natural evolution, and we just should, embrace it fully without creating so much resistance. And maybe it's going to be better than we think, because we simply don't know. It's like having a fog where we can only see for the next 5 meters, and behind it there could be a wall which would disrupt all of our expectations, or maybe there's nothing and we can just continue driving. I mean, by the way, I borrowed this slightly from Geoffrey Hinton and put it on my own twist. And maybe lastly, AI, so technology that is so advanced looks like magic from the outside. And if you ask anyone from the past, our grandmothers, our grandmothers, they would think we are just handling and dealing with magic. But the thing is, every one of us has a magic wand, but not everyone knows how to use it. And so some people are just, stuck in the Stone Age, and I prefer us to have one person that is Dumbledore, another person who is Harry Potter, and maybe we just end up wielding the magic wand better and better, and that is creating eventually the change we want to see in our life, in our society.
Yeah, this was a phenomenal talk with you. Amazing insights and actual true stories, and how a lot of tips how to actually tackle this topic and kind of structure it even just in your own head. So I appreciate your time and your insights very, very much, Terence La. Thank you very much for visiting us at the AI Talk Shop, and hopefully you can make a successful year and support many business leaders in taking this step, which takes a bit of courage to actually move forward. But then I think once someone is actually and factually trying to implement solve things with AI, it's a lot of fun, and it opens a lot of different directions of innovation. So yeah, appreciate very much that you came and talked to us, and hopefully a wonderful day to you.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled. Thank you so much. The pleasure is also mine. Thanks so much for asking really good questions that are important and that the audience should also listen to. I'm happy to redistribute, our words on social media.
Amazing. Thanks very much.
Bye.
Thanks, Ankita. Happy day. Great. Awesome, Terence. Thanks so much.
Recording stopped.